Hi, welcome to the Gen AI Mastery course. The goal of this course is to take you from a beginner Gen AI user to an expert user in 7 sessions. My name is Lucky from Gen Educate. Let's dive in. Having practiced the third activity, we are looking at the final activity in this session, which is the responsible auditor. What is this about? Now, the key skill that you're developing in this fourth practice is the adversarial grounding. Adversarial grounding is very important when you use generative AI too. What does it mean though? It's basically how you prevent generative AI from hallucinating or making up information. We've started working around this in the last 2 activities, but here you will hit the nail right on the head and you stop generative AI tools from doing what you don't want. This is adversarial grounding. This is very important when you need 100% correct content. There's no room for uncertainty or for error. For example, if you're working in a regulatory environment, like the workplace scenario we're looking at here, with environmental legislation or other regulatory document or environment where the content has to be absolutely correct, no errors. Errors might lead to serious problems. And you can also use it in other areas, but we're using this core sort of example because it's very important here. How not to do it. If you look at a prompt, summarize this regulation and tell me what I need to do about noise. That would be a disaster because errors might be in there and you will have a lot of information that you don't need, which is what takes time to edit and correct the information. But how do you do it properly though? The expert progression. The first step, you're forcing generative AI to use information from the document you provide or from the website or from the source that you've given it only. That way, you start a process of ensuring that generative AI do not use extra information. And the second step, you're actually adding another layer to stop generative AI from making up information or hallucinating. You're doing the same thing, but you're doing it twice in 2 different ways. And you don't even stop there because remember, you're trying to create content that is 100% correct. So you have to go through several steps of adversarial grounding. In step 3, you're asking for what's not in the provided doc. The reason you're doing this is to confirm if generative AI will follow the strict limitations that you've placed in steps 1 and 2. You have the limitations there. How about if generative AI don't follow them? But you need a way to check first, is generative AI following these limitations that I've set? It might not be yours might be more than 2 steps. You might have set 3 steps or 4 steps limitations before the adversarial testing to check, would it actually follow this step? It's like an exam. If you're training generative AI to not do XYZ, but you want to check to see if it's done it. And step 4, it's an extra manual check. If you follow all these different steps, you will get 100% accurate information or content from generative AI. There won't be errors in the content. But as usual, having talked about this, let's go on to our workbook and practice it. This is the final practice in this session, the responsible auditor, as it's titled. Again, you will see the prompt here in front of you from the slide, but we focus on the note at the bottom. I've already created both prompts. Here, because we are looking at a regulation, you will have to give generative AI the regulation or the document where that regulation is written, however it's written. So you have to feed generative AI the regulation, but it's a lot more than that. But now we're not just giving generative AI the prompt because we're talking about a regulation. So how not to do it also includes giving generative AI the regulation anyways, but that can be done wrongly, which is what we are trying to show here. So here we're saying summarize this regulation and tell me what I need to do about the noise. Okay, nothing specific. It just talks about noise in general. Let's run it. This is how not to do it. Let's run it and see what happens. Here, you will see the prompt before the test. This is the test. This is a regulation. It's just a snippet of a typical regulation. The typical regulation would be a lot longer than this, as you know. Okay, but then we have the prompt here, which is the main part, but we'll just use this example from a regulation and let's run it and see the difference. Let's go to how not to do it. It's giving a summary. You see here, regulation summary, noise requirement. It talks about noise. It uses information from the regulation, which is fine, which is a good place to start. However, generative AI adds a lot more that you don't need, which means you have to edit them out. And some of them are not actually correct. If you read everything properly, you see. So this bit here, you haven't asked for. It's been made up from what you've asked. So you've asked for A, B, and generative AI added C. Imagine if you're working with a 50-page regulation and this happens. If you're getting this out of these tests, you're getting an extra paragraph out of just these tests. Imagine a 50-page regulation. You would have plenty of information that you don't need. It will just make the use of the generative AI a waste. So it wouldn't be necessary using generative AI because it will just churn out a lot of information. And within that, you will have some information that you need at the introduction of the course. We talked about that where some people said they would never use generative AI anymore. That's what happens. You see some of the things that are useful, but then there's a lot that you don't need and you have to work around making it useful. That's where the time comes in to edit and change. However, if we look at where we've prompted it properly, you can see we started with an adversarial grounding. We started with a question to check. Remember step 3. Step 3 was to check whether generative AI will follow the limitations that we've set for step 1 and step 2. And what you see here is a clear way that it would. So it answers the question that you've asked is a trick question. If you look here, where you see it from the test, answer the following question: what is the fine for daytime noise violations, which is not here. So that's what it says. It doesn't provide it. Now you know that it will follow the limitation. So it's been grounded basically. So what you do is just go back. Now that you've tried it, it's tried and tested, and remove that part of the prompt that you used to test it. Once you remove that part of the prompt, then you run it and you will get accurate information, specifically what you want. This is what you asked for. The noise limits, applicable noise limit 9 times. It's giving it to you and created a small table specifically and where they came from, footnote. So this is just a basic example from a basic test from this test. Again, imagine if it was a 50-page document. All you get from that 50-page document would be what you need from the prompt that you gave it. That's all you get. You don't get more, and you don't get information that is not true. No hallucination. This is exactly what you want. This is exactly how you want to use it. And just for you to cross-check yourself, you would have the footnote that you can go back and check. And it gives you even the quote from the source. So you can check it before you use the information. You know it's accurate, but you don't need to edit it because it's giving you exactly what you want, which is the goal of this session, to ensure that you're able to prompt your generative AI and get what you want exactly without having to edit, or even if you have to edit, it's just a tiny bit of editing that you have to do. But thank you very much for staying to the end of this session, and I'll see you in the next session. Have a good day. Thank you.